want to get into some deep-rooted, embedded emotions that most of us have encountered at one point or another. And that is going to be geared around knowing your worth, and particularly in relationships. It does not necessarily have to be a love relationship in the sense of a partnership. What's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode here of Walking Manifestator. I'm your host, Pena, and in today's conversation, I want to get into some deep-rooted, embedded emotions that most of us have encountered at one point or another, and that is going to be geared around knowing your worth, and particularly in relationships. Now, I want to make this abundantly clear. It does not necessarily have to be a love relationship in the sense of a partnership who you are sharing a life with or any of that. It can be, but I want you to more so take this as any type of relationship. We have friendships, that is a relationship. We have partnerships in business, which is also a relationship. We have relationships with our kids, with obviously it can be a loved one. But this is something that really is going to be the fundamental pillar in all of the relationships that we have. So with that being said, let's dive deep into today's episode. And for those of you that have been following along on these past episodes, I just want to say thank you so much for the unwavering support. You guys are the ones that make this continuous message possible, which is that you have the ability to create your own reality. You have the ability to break past all the limiting beliefs and barriers that society has at one point or another made you believe, and that we no longer choose to accept as part of our identity. And for those of you that are new, welcome. This podcast is really just geared around giving you the tools and each other co-creating a community that is going to allow us to continue to be the best version of ourselves while impacting others in this journey. So thank you once again. Now, in the first pillar that I really want to discuss with you guys today is really knowing your worth. In the most important sense of this is the relationship that you have before anybody else's friendship, relationship, partnership, is the relationship that we carry with ourselves. And this is something that, if we really think about it, if we really dissect it, you need to understand that the relationship that we hold with ourselves is the most important piece of this puzzle, because how you allow anybody else to treat you, how you allow yourself to be treating yourself is super important. And I think this is something that if we don't take the time to really nurture, if we don't take the time to see where we can improve and where our blind spots are, then we will forever be in the same exact mindset. We will forever attract the same type of vibration into our life. So an example that I want to share with you is, how are we allowing others to communicate with us? What are the toxic behaviors that we are allowing and condoning? What are the toxic behaviors that we are performing ourselves to either somebody else or to ourselves? You see, I talk a lot about how most of us have been conditioned by this thought, right? This thought that we associate as our own. But in reality, these thoughts that we have really created this reality that we have. But if you really dissect it deeper, where do these thoughts come from? Well, they weren't just there. You started getting these thoughts based off your experience, based off the paradigm that you grew up with. And for those of you that don't know, a paradigm is basically a series of events that have almost exclusive control over your habitual behavior. Essentially things that have happened in your life that have now conditioned you to react, and interact the way that you do. So if you really think about it, when it comes to what behaviors are you allowing, what behaviors are you ignoring, it is the most critical part of the relationships that we're going to have with other people. Because if you can't love yourself, if you can't respect yourself, if you don't have boundaries for yourself, then how do you expect anybody else to have those for you? Now, the second thing is really prioritizing the aspect behind giving yourself the love that you need. And this is very different from knowing the relationship that you have with yourself and catering to it and embracing it. Because when we look at prioritizing your self-worth, a lot of people sometimes see that as narcissistic, right? Because you are now saying that you come first before anybody else. And I'm sorry, but there's a difference between narcissism and actually self-love. And you need to be able to be comfortable with the idea behind I come first before anybody else, because if I'm not good, I cannot make anybody else good. Think about it. Like, how can you love somebody else if you don't truly love yourself? I find this interesting because I think that most of us at one point or another, we've experienced a heartbreak, right? And if you think about it, the time in which you experience that heartbreak, for the most part, we essentially saw this as a piece of us that was now, being taken from us. And for the most part, when you go through a heartbreak, you feel like you're missing something. You feel like this person that you poured your emotions to, your time to, no longer cares for you, and therefore you identify that as you being lesser than. You identify that as there's something wrong with you. Now, this is very different from just saying like, oh, it's the other person's fault and I'm perfect. That's not where this is heading. And I'll give an example about that in just a second. But it's really not looking for somebody else to fill our cup and actually learning how to fill our own cup. And I heard this quote the other day, which really resonated with me. And essentially she says that person leaving, okay, and fill in the blank, it could be your parent, it can be your brother, it can be a partner, but is not necessarily leaving because of who you are, but because of who they need to be in order to be with you. And that really hit home, because I think that there's a difference between acting as if you know everything and acting as this perfect person and therefore everybody else is at fault, right? There's a difference between understanding that you need to work on yourself and understanding that you need to continue to get better in order to be the best version of yourself. And that quote, really what I took from it was, some people are just not meant to be in your journey, not because of you being the problem, but because there's too many things that they need to continue to improve on. There's too many things that they need to continue to work at that maybe just seems very hard for that person. And it's easier for them to go with somebody that is easy to control, easy to manipulate. And I really think that if we dissect this further into the relationships that we nurture, the relationships that we have, when people call narcissism, just thinking about yourself, I think narcissism is somebody that really is just involved with themselves to the degree of, it doesn't matter if I hurt other people as long as I'm good. There's a big difference between prioritizing yourself in order for you to be good for other people. Like I've said before, I have 2 boys, and I will never, and this can sound, and this can be something that most parents would disagree with, but most parents agree with the fact that I cannot prioritize them above my own needs, because if I am not whole for them, how can I, first of all, be there for them? But what example am I setting for them? I'm setting the example that if at one point in time they have this relationship with somebody that is willing to step all over them, that they should stay because they should prioritize this other person, when in reality, they should be prioritizing their own wholeness, their own feelings, their own emotions. So this is really important, and I want to read you this quote here that also really pertains to this, which is, I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think I am that you think I should be. So essentially, we're just so involved by trying to appease other people. We're so involved with trying to make the shoe fit, when in reality, some people are just not meant to be in that part of our journey. But how do we know if we haven't prioritized our boundaries, if we haven't prioritized who we are, if we haven't prioritized the relationship that we have with ourselves? This next point is also very important to understand, that we need to stop looking for somebody else to complete us. You need to be able to, again, fill your own cup. And you might say, Alexa, well, how do I do that? It really just comes down to taking time to sit with your thoughts and not just brush through the traumas that you went through, but really understand, what lesson can you learn? I recently went through some stuff, and in that moment when everything was happening, and still as I'm going through it, and maybe I'll talk about it a little bit later as, you know, things continue to work themselves out, as I know they will. But in that moment, I felt very disappointed in the person. I felt very betrayed by this person, because it's somebody that I was expecting more of. And that was a realization for myself, which is, number one, you shouldn't expect anything from anybody, which I've talked about in the past, but sometimes our human brain, right, can get very easily influenced by our external circumstances, which is why it's very important to continue practicing the art of awareness, right? Being aware at all times. And when this happened, it was something that for me personally, it took me a fraction of the time that it would have taken me in the past to accept what was going on, because I understood that it is not a representation of who I am. It is a representation of who they are. And it is not my place to change their perspective, as long as I am actively working on becoming the best version of myself, and I am showing up in my truest and most authentic self, and showing the truest and best version of myself for that other person. Now, this other person, again, remember, this is about knowing your worth in relationships, right? So you also need to be able to accept when it's not meant to be, right? What is for you will be, and what isn't meant will leave. So these are very important things that we need to start allowing ourselves to show love for ourselves, in order to really step into that vibrational frequency of the energies that we want to attract. Another pillar is, love is not a feeling, it is actually a choice. Michael Singer talks a lot about this in his book, several of his books, but the one that I read recently was The Untethered Soul, and he talks about how some people have asked him, like, well, I want to be happy. And then he'll say, well, why aren't you happy? And then they'll say, well, it's because they cheated on me, or it's because they left me, or it's because my person died, or whatever. And he's like, okay, but do you want to be happy? And they're like, well, yes, but I'm telling you, I'm going through all these pains right now in my life. He's like, you're not getting the question. But do you want to be happy? Regardless of all of these things, do you choose to be happy? And if you think about it, it really is a choice. We get to choose today whether we want to be in a bad mood or if we want to be in a happy mood. We get to react the way that we want to react. Even if somebody cussed you out this moment, you get to react the way you want to, whether you want to give them your energy or you're going to preserve your energy and just think, you know what, I'm pretty sure they're having a horrible day. I'm not going to interact with them. I'm not going to allow them to treat me this way. So I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to interact with this energy. So really understanding that it is a constant choice. It is a constant awareness behind it. Takes the focus away from everything is happening to me, poor me, and life is miserable, to, you know what? There's some turbulence happening right now, but I'm going to get past it, because I remember the last time that I was crying, feeling that the world was caving in. It didn't cave in. And I'm standing here and I'm okay. And I'm pretty sure all of you guys can associate this with one emotion or another. All of us, as long as you're human, you've cried at one point. And if you've cried at one point, you know that in that moment, it felt like the world was closing down. But then you remember that you went through it. And the only way past that was going through that emotion. And this is why I think it's so important for us to feel our emotions. A lot of us have been taught to suppress our emotions. I talked about this on one of my last TikToks, which was really, we're so conditioned by society, especially if you're a guy, you've been taught by society that you should not show your emotions, because if you show your emotions, then you're a wimp, and nobody wants that. And if you're a girl and you're too emotional, well, you're just too dramatic. And there's all these different concepts behind it. But in reality, we need to be able to experience these emotions and feel these emotions to pass through the emotion. And the only way that we can do that is by processing it and by sitting in that energy with the enough time for us to process that everything will be okay and that things will work out the way that they're supposed to work out. Another very important thing is that nobody is responsible for our happiness. Like, I want to say that again. Nobody should be responsible to make you happy. Like, if you think about it, whenever you hear these, like, you know, cliches that are like, well, you complete me, you're my better half, you're my soulmate. I call them cliches because in the past few years, I have really realized that you have to be whole in order for you to attract another whole person. And I wholeheartedly mean this. I have found that even if you feel whole in the sense that I'm working on myself, I value personal development, I value showing up as the best version of myself, I value, you know, the ambitious side of me, and whatever the case might be. If you get with somebody that doesn't value that because they feel lesser than, or they personally don't care about it and they just want to get by, what's going to happen is there's going to be friction. There's going to be friction because if you really think about it, this person isn't whole. And them seeing you shining is going to be a constant reminder of what they feel they're lacking. Therefore, this is where narcissistic behaviors can come into play. This is where avoidant tendencies can come into play because you're showing them something that they're very intimidated by. So I really wholeheartedly believe that nobody should make you happy in terms of filling your cup, and you should not be looking for somebody else to make that happiness happen. And I also want to say, because I read this in a book recently, and it was talking about how a lot of us are so consumed by essentially trying to find this other person to make us feel happy, right? And a lot of the times we believe in this like utopia of I should be happy all the time. And that's not necessarily true. You know, you can be at peace and not necessarily feel happy in that moment. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I enjoy my solitude. Like, I enjoy genuinely, I could not say this a few years ago, but now I can genuinely say I love my me alone time. Like, me being by myself when it's time to like maybe run some, I don't know, some meditations or do something by myself, whether it's coloring, whether it's going out to the range, whatever it might be. I genuinely enjoy being with my own energy because I really enjoy being able to enjoy myself, if that makes sense. And before, because we don't like the own internal thoughts that we constantly sometimes can have with ourselves, we're so consumed by looking for somebody else. Like, I don't know about you, but I had so many people that would like tell me like, how do you do it? Like, how do you go eat by yourself? Like, I could never sit there in a table and just eat by myself. And I was like, I like it. Like, I love going out of town and going to a restaurant that I really want to try out, getting all dolled up and going and taking myself for dinner. Why do I need to go with somebody else to feel whole? Why can't I enjoy my own energy? Why can't I be the person that brings that peace to myself to be comfortable enough to be comfortable eating by myself? So it's funny because if we really understand that nobody should really be the reason behind our happiness, then now you're whole and you can attract another being that is also whole and you complement each other. It's not about, oh, I need this person to survive. I need this person to be happy. I remember I would tell this ex-partner of mine when I was younger, I would tell them like, I don't need you. I want to be with you. And they would get super offended by that. Like, that was like the worst thing I could say to them. And I was like, you don't understand. Like, this personally is the best thing that somebody can tell me. Like, I don't need you, but I want to be with you. And that's the type of energy that you should attract. That is the type of energy you should give out. And when you work on these things, you're really now knowing your self-worth, you're embracing yourself, and as a result, you're going to attract better relationships. And the last thing is really becoming that frequency that you're seeking from the external circumstances. And A lot of us, we've been so conditioned by society, and I keep saying this because it's true. The thoughts that you have right now are pre-programmed based off people that you grew up with, based off things that you consume, based off things that you see, based off everything on your external life. But realistically, who you really are is deep down. And you need to really dig deep in order for you to find the soul that you are, so that you can continue to become a better version of yourself. And therefore, by doing so, continue to attract the right people, the right tribe to your energy. You see, when we know our worth, we are sending a signal to the universe and saying, I am not going to tolerate anything lesser than this. And some people might say, well, that's messed up. Like, why would you not give somebody an opportunity that is, not working to become a better version of themselves? Like, they're still a human being. You know what? Because this is my emotional thermostat. This is my physical thermostat. This is my mental thermostat. And that means that if I appreciate myself enough and I love myself enough to value myself, then I need to also be willing to attract those relationships and say no to the relationships that don't serve me. I'm not gonna go and hang out with somebody that just wants to get drunk all day, because that's not conducive to my life. I'm not gonna go and hang out with somebody that wants to go hurt people, because that's not conducive to my life. And you see, you shouldn't be ashamed of having these boundaries to such a degree to where you're going to attract the right people, and the people that are not meant to be will simply leave. So with that being said, I want to thank you once again for tuning in to yet another episode today. For those of you that are looking for some more one-on-one serious coaching, please check out walkingmanifestator.com, or also check the links down below. We have our free community that we share a bunch of free resources, free workbooks that we like to really just give back to help you deal with a lot of these things. And of course, if you have any feedback or any questions or any videos in particular that you would like for us to cover, please make this a priority for you to comment or send us an email. It doesn't matter, but so that we can cover it, because I promise you that if you have a question, there's somebody else out there that would love to ask that question, but maybe they're just shy. So thank you so much. I hope you have a fabulous day, and I will talk to you guys on the next one.